So we'll go just continue right on into the next line of the Genjokoan. And I'll say, I hope, since we've been sitting now 2 sittings, I hope you're finding the practice enjoyable, enjoying sitting, enjoying breathing, enjoying drinking and eating a little bit. Okay, the next line. When the 10,000 dharmas are without fixed self, there is no delusion and no realization, no Buddhas and no living beings, no birth and no death. The problem with this verse is that if we read it out of context, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it throws people. And oftentimes you get these short Zen sayings like this, no birth and no death, and it throws people for a loop, sometimes intentionally, to kind of wake us up and help us to see that there's something bigger, there's something more than our ordinary perception. So now we've been looking at the Dharma, at all things, the small d Dharma. We've been looking at the Dharma through a Buddhist lens. We've been practicing looking at the Dharma through the Four Noble Truths, through the Four Seals. And we come to see through our own realization, through our own visceral sense of that, a visceral sense, a bodily sense, that there is no separation between self and others. Bless you. The subject and the object become one. So when we're sitting for a while, we can really open up to this reality. When our heart is, and I mean metaphorically, when our heart is kind of fixed and we feel a solid sense of self, we need to do something in order to open ourselves up, in order to massage the spiritual heart, so that we can have some realization through our own physical body. It's not an intellectual understanding here of no separation between self and other. And sometimes these experiences can be quite profound and quite scary, especially if you're not very well grounded. If you have, like, say, for example, a drug high or a drug experience, you can experience no separation between self and other, but it may not be very grounded, and it can destabilize you. It can make you actually mentally ill. So this experience of no self, this experience of no separation between self and other, it really requires, I think, some grounding and some foundational understanding of the Buddha's teachings, however they might be presented. That's why we have this particular setting. It provides a form. The first line of the Genjokoan is to provide the context in which we're practicing. The experience of no separation between self and others is not confined to Buddhism. It's not confined to practice. You can have that experience in other contexts. Sometimes they happen without us even doing anything deliberately. And other times we can have them based on our efforts, our practice. But even saying that we can make an experience happen through our own efforts is a little bit misleading. But I can share with you, I remember specifically, I had been sitting on my own mostly for about a little over a year. I went to see my teacher every once in a while, but I was living at home and didn't have regular access, at least at that time, 1995, to a teacher. And when she was coming to our university, it was oftentimes when I was doing something else that I couldn't get out of. So I was very interested, though, in trying to doing a full sesshin. And this was a week long, it was like a 5-day sesshin. I'd never done a sesshin before, and for those of you who don't know sesshin, it's a 5 days of sitting regularly, not even just regularly, but one sitting after the other with walking meditation in between, 10 to 12 40-minute sittings of meditation. Some of you are familiar with that. And I had some really interesting experiences doing that, where I physically, I could feel space opening up in my chest cavity. It was a visceral feeling. It wasn't just imagined. And I thought, this is during the middle of the retreat, when I was in the middle of, it was in July, in the heat of summer. There was no air conditioning. I was dripping with sweat. I was very uncomfortable. I wanted to just go and take a shower and be done with it. My back was hurting a lot. I had never done anything like that before. And I knew it was going, but I was prepared. I knew it was going to be a physical and a psychological challenge, and I was ready for that part. I was at least mentally prepared to go into it. But then the physical and the psychological, these things kick in, and you're like, okay, now this is really testing whether I want to continue or not. Well, it wasn't much of a choice for me. I just knew this is what I wanted to do, and see what happens. I just left it at that. And in the middle of this sheen, all of a sudden, out of all, this sweat literally dripping down my face, the discomfort of back, I felt like a knife was in the center of my spine. And then all of a sudden, it felt as though somebody was standing above me, pouring very warm water down through the top of my head and into this chest cavity, like the heart region, and just something happened there. I had been holding on to something in my heart. I can't put words to it right now. Even now, I can't put words to what I was holding on to, but I was holding on to something. It was almost like a physical holding on. And the experience was of release. There was a sense of release, and I almost wanted to look up. Is somebody pouring something on me? And but it was just, I went from pain to wonder, really. I mean, the pain didn't disappear completely, but there was some great ease that took place. And on top of that, when the retreat ended and I was on my way home driving in my little mini caravan, near Mount Equity Zendo, there was these small hills, mountain type things, lots of rocks in the side that you drive around to get, as you're going down towards Route 15. And there was this butterfly coming down out of the mountains, and then, I was so sensitive. That's the thing that Zazen does, it sensitizes us to everything around us. And there's this sense of, like, the molecules in my body are same as the molecules in the walls and the floors, right? And of course with each other. I mean, but on a very physical level. And here's this butterfly coming down, and I'm thinking, oh no, the car is going right for it, but if I swerve, I'm going to get into an accident. And sure enough, it went right into the window at a high speed. It's going about 60 miles an hour, and splat on the window shield, I heard. And what happened, what I could sense was that the energy of that butterfly went through the window shield and right into that chest cavity, because I could feel the wings of the butterfly flapping and then kind of dissipated. So there was a very, very visceral sense, a very physical sense of no separation between self and other. Right? That we put out there energy, and our action continues on into the future in some form, whether we are here or not. The actions of our life continue on into the future, whether we're here or not. That's That's no death, right? That's a no death. I'm here because of the actions of my ancestors. I'm here because of the actions of my parents. Even though my father just recently passed away, I am his continuation. I'm the continuation of his body, his actions, his mind. I don't have the same body and mind as his, but certainly his actions have influenced who I am today. In some ways, I've wanted to be the opposite, but still, that's an influence. That's a huge influence. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be me. And that's the same for all of our ancestors. Their lives are reverberating through your body. Right? Our body is an echo chamber for our ancestors. When the 10,000 dharmas are without a fixed self, right? That's what's no subject and object. So this is all to say that when we really practice deeply, we're really practicing meditation, that we become highly sensitized to our immediate surroundings. And we see that we've created boundaries, false constructs in our mind that separate ourselves from others. We do that. That's what the mind does. And through practice, we see that that's what we do, and that it's not the full picture. It's not reality. It's not the fullness of reality. There's also the dissolving of those boundaries. And so the next part of this line says, there is no delusion and no realization. There's no delusion and no realization. If there's no separation between ourselves and the Buddha, we are equal to Buddha. We are equal to Buddha. Buddha isn't higher and we're lower. There's no Buddhas and there's no living beings. That's a false separation. There's no Buddhas above and living beings below. There's equality there. There's what we call byodo, equanimity, equality. And this is the teachings of emptiness, another way of talking about emptiness. This whole second phrase here is about the emptiness teachings. And historically, these teachings come some 4 to 5 centuries after the Buddha's passing away. So that's why we have the first line that we talked about earlier is the original teachings of the Buddha. The second line of Genjokoan is historically it's an evolution and a revolution within the teachings of the Buddha. There is this teaching of no suffering, no birth, no death, no cause of suffering, no end to suffering, and no eightfold path that leads to the end of suffering. It's a complete negation of all the teachings of the Buddha, and yet the negation is not to dismiss the teachings of the Buddha, but to deepen our understanding of those teachings.
That's like the Heart Sutra.
Exactly. That's what the Heart Sutra is about.
So the Heart Sutra, what is your opinion? Did that originate in China, as some people have said, or do you think it originated with the Buddha?
That's a good question. I'm not as knowledgeable about the history, but it's been a while since I've studied that history. And Kaz Tanahashi has a book out on the Heart Sutra that I found really helpful about it. You can study that, but if I remember correctly, I think if it didn't originate in China, it got much more developed in China.
It sounds very Taoist, because this almost sounds Taoist as well. That's why I kind of thought about it. So you're saying that the Buddha didn't teach that. He didn't teach the end of that. All that negation?
Well, that's a good question. The emphasis, I can say that the emphasis, there's stages, there's an evolution in teaching.
Okay.
He's still the Buddha is still his the Madhyamika, the teachings. This is known as Madhyamika, the teachings of the middle way. It's a deepening of the understanding of the Buddha.
Okay.
It's a deepening of the Buddha's teaching. Did he say it? Oh, that's a good question. I don't want to say yes. I don't want to say no.
If you read the Diamond Sutra, I mean, I can see that concept in there
Mm-hmm.
really clearly. There is, there isn't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no, there is.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the first sentence.
Yeah, and it just, I think whether these things, the order and the history and all that is not as important as getting a sense of the first section of Genjokoan, the first line, the first sentence is laying the foundation, it's laying the ground. The second line is breaking up that ground, right? It's breaking it up. You got to have ground there in order to break it up. So the second line is breaking it up. And that can be very confusing for people. First you say there's Buddha, there's realization, there's delusion. Now you say there's no Buddha, there's no living beings, there's no birth, there's no death. Okay, we're getting into something a little bit deeper. This is beyond conceptual thought. Our minds create scabs. Our minds create these films. It's like what is it? It's like a collagen that forms over the muscles when it doesn't move. You know what I mean? When we get from yoga, the muscles get all stiff when they don't get moved and exercised enough. We don't realize, and then we start moving, and it breaks up that layer, that thin layer that forms around a muscle that hasn't been moved. And so you got to break that up. That thin layer is like the original teachings of the Buddha in an idea form. It's stale, and it needs to be broken up. So we need to have our understanding tested again and again, because we get stale. Our mind, it gets like this. Once we hear the teachings of the Buddha, our mind gets stale with the teachings of the Buddha. And we need to freshen it up. So you have the emptiness teachings there to freshen it up. Otherwise, what happens? We take the teachings of the Buddha too literally. We think that that's all there is. And we think we understand it. So this is about removing the carpet from under our feet so that we can go into free fall. We don't know what's up and what's down. This is important. It's important to have the experience of no up, no down. Right now, I'm not having that experience. I know that's up and that's down, right? But there's also the experience of no up and no down. And if you ask the astronaut up in space where up is, how it is up there, you say, what do you mean up? Where's up in space? Space is all around us, but because of gravity, it seems we're giving the illusion that there's an up and there's a down, that there's a path and there's a path to walk on. But all of this time, we've already been there's some aspect of us that knows the deeper truth. And that's what the second line is getting at. We know there's a deeper truth. There is Buddha for those who don't know what Buddha is. Right? We come to practice because we don't know what Buddha is. We'll bow to Buddha, we'll light incense, we'll light a candle, put flowers, make offerings, and that's creating a duality, a dichotomy between ourselves and Buddha. And that's fine, that's an important piece. But then we got to undo that. We set it up so that we can take it down. Right? If you want to exhale, you have to inhale. If you want to inhale, you have to exhale. And so the Dharma is flexible. It opens and closes. This is not an intellectual practice. Right?
Yeah, it seems like there's a relationship between the first and second line.
Mm-hmm.
First is very relative, life, death, Buddhas, ordinary people.
Mm-hmm.
Second line negates it. You can't negate, like you said, something unless it's present.
Right. We need.
There's a relationship.
There's a relationship.
Right.
Yeah. I'd like to offer you some lines. And the Heart Sutra is one of the places where you can find this negation. But the Avatamsaka Sutra is replete with it as well. So let me read some from this. This is something I shared last night about chapter on 10 acceptances. And we were practicing the calligraphy for Yume, or dream. And this is about the acceptance of being dreamlike. This is one of the 10 acceptances of the enlightening beings, of the bodhisattvas. Acceptance of being dreamlike. Here, great enlightening beings know all worlds are like dreams. It doesn't make sense, does it? With our head, all worlds are like dreams. It seems real, doesn't it? All worlds are like dreams. Just as dreams are neither of the world nor apart from the world, not of the realm of desire, not of the realm of form, not of the formless realm. Where are they? If it's not in form, not in non-form, not arising, not disappearing, not defiled, not pure, and yet obviously manifest. In the same way do enlightening beings know all worlds to be dreams, unchanging, because of being free like dreams, because of clinging like dreams, because of being inherently unconnected like dreams, because of being like the basic nature of dreams, because of being like visions and dreams, because of being undifferentiated like dreams, because of being like thoughts and dreams, because of being as when awakening from a dream. The great enlightening beings observe the voice of the Buddhas as emerging without emerging from inside or outside or both. Where's the Buddha's teachings emerge from? From the Buddha? From inside the Buddha? No. From outside the Buddha? No. From both? No. There's no origination. There's no non-origination. There's no birth. There's no death. Right? So this keeps us on our toes. We can't rest in knowing. If we know, which we think we do, then we are already off base. And so the teachings of the second line are to wake us up to the truth, to the Dharma. It's another form of the Dharma.